So Chris, thank you so much for coming on the Arcade Attack podcast. It really is a real honour to have you here. I really appreciate your time talking to us.
Well, thank you, and hi.
We've had the pleasure of talking to Tommy Tallarico a few weeks ago, and he's another music legend in the game industry. But I can't wait to hear your story as well, how you got into music and games and how it all came together. So the first question really is, how did you first, or what's your first or earliest memories of music and video games, and how did the two worlds collide for you?
Yeah, so with me, it definitely started with music, actually. So I grew up in a musical family. You know, my grandma was a piano teacher, and later my aunt and my mom also became piano teachers. So we always had like instruments in the house. Excellent. And I think I started like hammering on those instruments already at age 4 or something.
Wow.
And I think really like the first time I became interested in music or things on the radio or electronic music for that matter actually was in the early mid 70s, Popcorn from Gershon, or what's the name was of the guy who invented that. I think it was a big hit by another band called Popcorn, Hot Butter, and they made this Popcorn song.
Oh, okay.
And maybe that appealed to like a 4 or 5 year old or something. I don't know, but I heard that, and I was hooked on music, and with the pianos in the house and stuff like that. It just was like kind of a destiny.
Yeah.
And then my grandma tried to give me piano lessons from probably age 5, age 6, around there. But I didn't stick with it. I did it for about a year or two, because my grandma was very old school, and she would, she was a really nice woman, but when she was teaching piano, I tell you, she would hit her students with a stick. So that was not very appealing to me. And then also a little bit later, I really got into that sound of electronic music.
Yeah.
So I listened to the radio, to the special radio show, sounds from the synthesizer. That was the thing that was running. And so I became really a fan of like Tangerine Dream and Kraftwerk and Vangelis and Jean-Michel Jarre, all those like early synthesizer pioneers. They were my idols.
Oh, excellent, yeah.
From that point on in my early, probably when I turned 10, 11 or something, I wanted to own a synthesizer.
Mm.
And I couldn't afford one. And then a little bit later, when the Commodore 64 was introduced in the market, I realized, hey, this has a real synthesizer sound chip, and that could be my entry to make synthesizer music.
Nice.
So, yeah. And with games, it was probably like a parallel development, where I had my first video game experience at a fair, at the fairgrounds in our town, where the early arcade games were brought in, and people were putting in their, the money, and were playing video games. And that was like really in the early days, like maybe a little slightly after Pong, but like Space Invaders and stuff like that.
Proper classics. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah. And that was my first contact, and obviously I was hooked immediately as like a child. Those things have an enormous draw, and I actually became addicted to arcade games for a while there, until I was able to get a Atari VCS. That first system with the cartridges.
Yeah.
And then I was hooked on that. That kind of weaned me off my arcade addiction. And I played on the Atari. And then again, like the home computers, my friend had like a Commodore VC20, and then the Commodore 64 was introduced. And really that was for me like the machine to have, because of that synthesizer sound chip, and because I would be able to play games on there. and stuff like that. So I don't know. Should I go deeper into this? I saved up some money. I was delivering newspapers to save money for that Commodore 64. And I remember also like the day I didn't want to wait any longer. We went to another city to buy a computer.
Yeah.
And all I had was like 400 Deutschmarks, and the Commodore 64 was 500. No. And I almost bought an Atari 400 XL or something like that.
Yeah.
Because that was in my budget. But my grandma, bless her soul, did realize that I wanted the Commodore 64 and gave me the rest of the money. So I brought home my Commodore 64, and the rest is history, but we'll talk about that.
Nice.
More, yeah.
Brilliant. That's a lovely. So you've got the game machine of your dreams. You had to be patient,
exactly.
Obviously. Yeah, no, I can. I remember doing a paper round actually, saving up money for a PC. It took a long time. So brilliant stuff.
Absolutely.
And
your recording is running, right?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is.
You don't want all this stuff and then something fails.
Oh no, definitely. I'm going to double check now. It's definitely recording, Chris. Don't worry about it.
Cool.
How did you get into the video game industry then? I appreciate you're a massive fan of music, massive fan of games, but how did you actually get into the industry?
Yeah, that was, I slid kind of into it because I got that Commodore 64, and obviously the first year I was only playing games. When it's hard to fathom for somebody who's growing up today how that actually was, because when you buy a computer nowadays, you switch it on and there's like 1,000 programs that you can use right away, and there's professional music software and video editing and all that stuff. When you turn on the Commodore 64, you get nothing. There's like a cursor blinking, and then what do you do? And I was like 14 or 15 years old, and I had a little tiny bit of programming experience from a computer that my uncle owned, a business computer. I could type in like the 10 for something and then print and then return and stuff like that. So I could do like some basic programming.
Yeah.
But other than that, the machine would do nothing, right? So then the first year I was only gaming and playing games. And then I got kind of more interested. Hey, I got the bug of like, I wanted to develop my own game because I was such a fan of games.
Yeah.
That was a logical step. So, and the music was still there, but I was also like helping out at a music store in town. And I was actually at that time already playing with real synthesizers and MIDI and all that stuff. So I had a little bit of an outlet there. So I was really trying to get into game development.
Nice.
And basic programming didn't cut it. I developed my first game in BASIC, and that didn't go very far. And I decided I need to learn machine language or assembly. And a friend of mine actually was a pretty good assembly programmer, and he taught me a lot. And then the rest came from like books and just trying out things. And this was actually the most exciting part, the trying out things, because when you're like 15 or 16 years old and you're discovering something like that, all of a sudden you feel like God.
Yeah, it's in your hands.
In a way.
Isn't it? Yeah, it's in your hands.
Yeah, because you do something that not a lot of other kids out there are doing. And then you get like the rewards when you make something happen on the machine.
Yeah.
And so that was really like that pioneer drive that we had, my friends and I, to get something special out of the machine. And that's when I also realized I'm really not that good in developing games. But I did learn assembly language, and then I got back into the music part because my friend had actually already sold a game to a games company.
What game?
And he was working.
Sorry.
I don't know what his first one was, but the second one he was working on, he needed music for because it was already a step up from the first game he did.
Yeah, okay.
And he wasn't a musician or musically inclined. And so I learned programming and assembly, and I made the first game music for his game. And that game was called Planet of War.
Nice. Okay, brilliant.
the interesting part about it is, so this all happened in like 1985, and his game did not come out until 1987, when I was already working for Rainbow Arts.
Wow.
So it came out much later, but it was nevertheless my first game music. And then from that point on, I developed my music player further, and I saw a call for a contest in a magazine, a prominent C64 magazine in Germany. They wanted music generated with the Commodore 64, and you could send up in your piece, and then they would pick the 10 best, and there was obviously a grand prize.
Wow.
For first place. And I just wanted to send something in because I wanted I wanted to be in the top 10 there.
Yeah.
To appear on their cover list that they wanted to put on a special edition of their magazine. And to my surprise, I won that contest.
Well done.
So, and I made first place. And that piece was called Shades.
Yeah.
And that really like essentially kickstarted my career. And, from that point on, it was getting really busy. I developed actually the sound monitor, which was an editor for music data, because before I was just typing it into memory, and that was very tedious. So the sound monitor was like the next step of making the entering of the music data easier. And that is now known as kind of like the granddaddy of trackers, if you will.
Yeah.
And that was then released in the sister magazine as listing of the months. And then with that, all that going on, I also looked for gigs in the games industry. I was still in school, and first I looked for freelance projects, and I called Rainbow Arts. They had an ad in one of those magazines.
Yeah. And
they were just like starting out, but they were starting out big. They had a good funding for their first year, and they came out big. You know, we want to be Germany's #1 game developer, and they had all kinds of projects in the pipeline. And I called them up. I remember in those days it was really easy for me. You know, I called them up on the phone, talked to the boss, and played him some pieces over the phone that I had done with my sound monitor and that Shades piece, and told him about it. And he said, "I'm going to hire you. You know, you can you can start here tomorrow." And I said, "I'm still in school. I can't do that." But anyway, so I did some freelance projects for them, and then I did quit school actually, mid 12th grade, and started working for them.
Wow, were your parents a bit miffed about you skipping or missing school? Were they happy about that?
Yeah, they were definitely concerned about it, but they also saw my passion. They saw my early successes. I already started earning money.
Wow.
And the job was actually a good job, and they know how much I struggled in school, not because I was dumb, but because I had no interest in school.
Yeah.
You know, I only went to like 12th grade and wanted to go on to 13th grade because I didn't want to do like an internship or anything. I did not even want to go to university, but it was just to keep the status quo, you know. I stay in school for a little bit longer so I can play with my computers and music.
Brilliant.
And so when that came, I knew that there was an opportunity there, and they saw the salary that they were offering me, and they said, "Well, you can always come back if it doesn't work out." But, you know, I went, and that was that.
Well done.
Been in the games industry ever since, almost 32 years now.
I mean, that was a brilliant decision, I bet. Have you ever thought, what would life be like if you didn't take the opportunity and you're stuck at school? Have you ever thought where you'd be right now? How crazy is that?
I can't even fathom it. I mean, yeah, there would have probably been a life for me, sure, but I don't know if I would have been comfortable or happy.
Yeah. Well,
so
that's amazing. I suppose that's advice. If you want to get where you want, you take those opportunities, you take a few risks.
You really need to, but you also need to see yourself, and you need to know in your heart that you can do it, because I mean, you can't. If you have no talent and you're like lazy or whatever, and I have my own laziness, but that's a different story. But if you have any doubts about your abilities, then you can't really do such a thing. But if you know in your heart that this is the right thing and you have something to bring to an industry or to a craft or whatever, then totally go for it.
Yeah,
that's all you got. You know.
Brilliant. No, that's excellent advice, and I really like that story. Brilliant. Your list of games is incredible. I mean, you've worked on, I don't know, 60, 70, 80 games. We could
I think it's actually close to 100.
Well, there you go then. I mean, that's incredible. I mean, we can talk about individual titles all day, but like R-Type, Monkey Island, Turrican, Resident Evil, Giana Sisters. I mean, can you explain the feeling of when you finally
Star Wars?
Star Wars. How would you describe the feeling when you actually finish a project, you see it released? What sort of buzz do you get? How does that feel? Can you put it into words?
Well, I would say, finally done, man. I hate this project. and then it takes me about it takes me a few months to recover, and then I started to like it again. But yeah, I had quite a few projects where when it was finally shipped, I wanted nothing to do with it anymore.
Fair enough. That's great honesty. I can probably understand why you're saying that. I suppose you get so involved, you're almost ready to, move on to the next project. But yeah, no, fair play. Can you run through a typical day of writing music for a video game, and how long does it take typically to start and complete a track? What's the typical day in your life then, Chris?
There is no typical day, really. I mean, it's crazy. Sometimes it's a process. It's not really a day. It's not fixed work hours. It's a total process. And sometimes it's very, very hard to just buckle down and try to come up with something. And often that does not work out.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a certain amount of like craft that's involved, but you need that initial spark that really gets it going, and that can take anywhere from a few hours to 2 weeks or something for a piece. And I've dabbled with different ways of like breaking writer's block when you hit it.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's as simple as like just dropping everything and going to the movies, to be honest.
Yeah, clear your mind and yeah.
And sometimes that could be construed as laziness or things like that, but it's actually absolutely necessary for creative work. And I've had cases where, wake up from a dream or something, and I jump up to run to the machine, and there's a melody there, and I have to get it down and record it, and then there's a piece, and then you flesh it out, of course, but that initial spark is really important.
Yeah, no,
and I try to fill my life with definitely inspirational things to make that happen.
Good. So you love your music. You into other like creative things like art and films as well. Then is that what you're saying as well?
Yes, absolutely.
Brilliant. No, excellent. I want to focus on one series of games now, the Turrican series. We are big fans here at Arcade Attack. We love them. We love the soundtrack. We like the games as well. I think they're brilliant. Can you remember what inspired you when working on these classic games? And how would you reflect back on the actual Turrican series? Is it up there with your best, do you think? Because, we're massive fans, trust us.
I think so. It came at the right time, and it was the perfect project for that time.
Yeah.
Because it was a few years into my career, and I had the experience, but I also had, I had kind of like an idea of what I wanted to do, and that game really opened the floodgates for my creative output. And so it all ties in with like that early wish of doing synthesizer music.
Yeah.
So, and I also was heavily inspired by pop music. I wanted catchy melodies. I always say like, for fun, I bring that up, and it's slightly embarrassing that I'm a fan of Italo disco.
Yeah.
From the early 80s, and that had played a role in there. And so I thought like when Turrican came about, I thought like, okay, we have a game that's like action, it's jumping around, it doesn't take itself too serious. And so why not come up with like a driving synthesizer soundtrack and the driving part was more like rock style.
Yeah.
So faster tempos, like usually around 150, 160 beats per minute, and just like balls to the wall synthesizers and beats. And that became the signature for that. And then I was also inspired by Japanese games. They also have that kind of drive. And so there were some inspirations from that. That was just the perfect project for me. And I think to this day, that shows in all its also reincarnations.
Yeah. Yeah, brilliant. I agree. It goes so well with the game. It's quite a big series of games, real classics, and the music and the gameplay work so well together. You also worked on Resident Evil 2. Can you? I mean, we are again huge fans of that series. What was your exact work on that game? And did you, at the time, did you know you were working on a classic?
Yeah, I did play the first Resident Evil, and I think this was a port done in San Diego.
Yeah.
A friend of mine worked at that company, and through his referral, they contacted Factor 5. I was already in the US there, in the San Francisco Bay Area, and they wanted to use that music system that we had developed for the Nintendo 64.
Yeah.
And so I flew down there and spent a few days there in their offices with their sound guy, and we worked on the port of the game. So I did not compose music for the game, but I knew what I was working on, and I was obviously honored to work on such a big franchise and classic.
Of course.
And but I remember it was hard too. There were some difficult times to squeeze that amount of data and samples and sounds and everything into that memory and make that happen.
Yeah, it's still amazing they managed to get a good version of Resident Evil 2 on the N64, and keeping the sound and music there as well is a big achievement, isn't it? Let's be honest.
Yeah.
When you work on ports, then is that more pressure, less pressure? Is some creative freedom taken away when you work?
Yeah, there's really no creative freedom if you do a port, and all the difficulty then is usually on the technical side. I also remember that with Monkey Island.
Yes.
We were sweating bullets to port that, but we got it done. And to this day, many people tell me that they like the Amiga version as one of the best sounding ones. So that's obviously I'm very happy about that.
Wow.
I actually prefer to do original stuff over ports, but sometimes you have to do it, and I'm not unhappy that I've done it, but I would prefer original work over ports.
Good stuff. Well, I can echo what people said about Monkey Island. That's how I played the game with the Amiga, and the music is part of it, and it's so, I can still remember listening to it now when I was playing the game in my bedroom so many years ago. So I have to say, excellent job on Monkey Island. Are you a fan of those games as well, the Monkey Island series?
I never played them back then. I did play them recently, 2-3 years ago, when I had my Twitch show.
Yeah.
That I did for a while, and that's when I really also understood why it had such a following, because I was really more an arcade person.
Sure.
And so I really never got into the adventure category that much. But it was fun to see that, also to see it from start to finish. Yeah.
Brilliant. You sort of touched on it earlier when you were talking about Turrican, but again, pretty open question, but what are your biggest inspirations when you work on video game music? What's the big overall, if you could put it into words?
Well, it draws really from everything, really from the synthesizer legends over to pop music of the 80s, over to film music, film scores. I got really a lot into film scores in the early 90s.
Yeah.
And then also Japanese arcade style stuff. There's a lot. I mean, became a huge fan of Yuzo Koshiro.
Okay.
When he worked on the Super Nintendo and on the Sega Mega Drive.
Yeah.
And so, there's many sources.
Fair enough. And I suppose it keeps coming, doesn't it? You're still working in the games industry now. I suppose you're always open to new inspirations and so forth.
Absolutely.
Good on you. How do you reflect back on your video game music? I mean, like you said, you've been in the game for over 30 years. Would you reflect, and do you have a personal favourite soundtrack? Is there a piece of music or a particular game that you think, yeah, this is my pinnacle, my peak?
Well, that's got to be Turrican 2, right?
Turrican 2, yeah.
Yeah.
Classic.
But other maybe slightly lesser known favorites are the Apedia, which I did with my own company that I founded with two friends.
Yep.
That was an arcade side scroller on the Amiga. That actually is also probably up there as one of the best Amiga games, action games that came out. And then also Jim Power, that was probably at the same time, which is kind of, that one is kind of goes into similar direction as Turrican, but it's slightly more inspired by the Japanese arcades. Yeah. So I'm quite happy and proud of that project. And then obviously my work later on the Star Wars games.
Yeah.
Which was a whole different beast because we did take a lot of the soundtracks from the movies, but what some people don't know is about half the music is also original and new compositions.
Wow.
That are just trying to fit in with the Star Wars tracks.
That must be difficult because obviously you've got so much pressure to deliver, fit into the landscape. That must be another level of pressure, I suppose.
Enormous pressure, and particularly because I was also such a big John Williams fan.
Yeah,
I still am to this day, of course, and that was a very hard project, particularly the first one, Star Wars Rogue Squadron. Because not only did I try to make a soundtrack that fit into the Star Wars universe, but also I had to do it on the cartridge. You know, Nintendo 64 was the last cartridge game, really.
Of course,
game console. Yeah. And so it was limited in memory for sampling. It had limited sound channels, and so that was a very, very hard project. And that was particularly one where after it was done, I could not look at it for years.
Really?
And then much later, I played it again years later, and that's when I realized, hey, I actually did a pretty good job on that one.
I'm sure many people would agree with you. So yeah, well done. You've obviously worked for many games companies. You've worked for some huge players, some indie projects as well. Is there a games company that you particularly love working for? Is there one that gave you all the freedom in the world? Is there any companies that really sort of stand out for you that you love working for?
No, I think really the best companies obviously were Factor 5, Rainbow Arts, and my own company. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's here and there's like some developers that treat you better, and then there's some that are more difficult. So I can't really say there's one that 100% stands out. But obviously my involvement with Factor 5 was the best one of my career, obviously.
Yeah, some proper hits then, wasn't it? Definitely. Good stuff. I asked Tommy this, a slightly cheeky question, But did you ever work on a game or a piece of music that you actually found really difficult to complete, like maybe writer's block, and you found it hard to get motivated for? Is there maybe a particular piece of music you just didn't think really hit all the right numbers for you?
I think that actually happens on pretty much every project was one of the pieces.
Oh, okay.
Except for maybe the few projects where you only compose a title music or something, like I did with the R-Type series. There I really just had a blast and got it done and out the door, and it was super fun. But usually, like on larger games, it's on every one of them you hit pieces that just are very difficult to complete.
Yeah. No, fair enough. We have a bit of a love-hate relationship with Bubsy here at Arcade Attack.
I'm not surprised.
He's a bit
actually, I was kind of like riding the controversy and say, hey, now I'm doing Bubsy, hey.
He divides opinion, that's for sure. Some people love him, some people can't stand him. How did you get the opportunity to work on his latest game, and what are your views on this particular character? Are you a fan of Bubsy, for example?
I'm not a fan. I can't say I hate him.
Yeah.
But he was really just I was barely aware of that franchise.
Ah, okay.
And so the reason I got it was because the company who developed that for this other company that worked with the original company and the rights and everything, that was Black Forest Games, who had worked with me on the Giana Sisters Twisted Dreams, obviously.
Yeah.
And so that's why they contacted me, because we had such a good work relationship on the Giana Sisters latest installment.
Fair enough. No, fair enough. So you haven't really got an opinion about the character himself, but fair play to him. He's back, isn't he?
That game was also a collaboration with my friend and frequent collaborator Fabian Del Priore from Germany.
Yeah.
Who is kind of like he's almost my alter ego, mini me, whatever. So we go way back into the mid 90s and worked on quite a few projects together. And he gets my style, and we always have like a good work relationship.
Brilliant.
He had fun with that project too.
Yeah, I bet it is. Working on a Bubsy game has got to be good fun, right? You can't take it that seriously. I'm sure it's a lot of fun.
Exactly.
Yeah. When I was speaking to Tommy before, he actually mentioned you as a games composer that he really likes and respects. Is there, apart from your own work, is there a game or any other sort of people in the industry, in the music industry, in the game industry, that you are a big fan of?
Well, I mean, I mentioned Yuzo Koshiro.
Yeah.
He's definitely one. And then Marty O'Donnell, with the Halo series was really a milestone.
Yeah.
But there's so many, Assassin's Creed really impressed me.
Yeah.
The Jasper Kid soundtracks. But yeah, I mean, we could go on forever. And
when you play
so many awesome games.
So, when you play these games, have you always got an ear out listening to their music and seeing how it's done in other people's ways? I bet it's quite interesting.
And let's not forget, here's also a shout out to really the early veterans, Rob Hubbard.
Legend, yeah.
First and foremost, and all the British composers. That was actually interesting. When I finished Shades, that won the contest. At that time, I wasn't even aware of Rob Hubbard.
Yeah.
And the editor from the magazine, he called me, or we talked on the phone, and he essentially said like, "Hey, I think your music and quality reminds me of Rob Hubbard." And I said like, "Who's that?" and then I realized a little bit later and heard some music, and that was really cool. And yeah, I mean, there were so many that really shaped the way.
Do you ever work? Have you worked with Rob before? Have you worked with many of these sort of legends as well, or is it quite a solo sort of job?
No, we never worked together, and also back then it was not the time of the internet or anything.
Yeah.
It was actually really difficult to communicate with somebody in a different country, and so I never had contact until much later. I met Rob, I think, in 2001 or so at the Game Developers Conference out in the US.
Yeah.
And that was cool. But I didn't have a lot of contact to these legends, as you say.
Well, I'm sure there's mutual respect both ways, because you're definitely a legend in my eyes as well, Chris. So good on you. Is there any advice you could give anyone looking to enter the music or video game industry? Is there anything you could say? Any pearls of wisdom?
Well, if it's your passion and you if you're honest enough and you know that you got the talent for it, then really there's different ways to. Well, I mean, I was really lucky when I started out that there was no competition essentially.
Yeah.
I mean, in Germany there were maybe like 2 or 3 people who were doing things like that. In the UK there were a handful, but that was it. In Europe even. And so it was not really difficult to break into the industry. Nowadays it's also like you can do a lot of education actually. Like there are courses for video game development, for audio for games and so on. There's specialized colleges for that. I think for music composition you could do just like similar to film composing.
Yeah.
There's classes all over the world. Just for like scoring and stuff, it would probably be very helpful if you could learn how to score for orchestras.
Yeah.
There's definitely a lot of ways how you can build a career. It might be just it needs a little bit more work than in those early days. Even though, I mean, we were also like not to minimize what we did, because part of that work that we did back then, the pioneer work, was learning to program and developing our own software and stuff like that, which was probably just as difficult as learning how to score for an orchestra. So
it's a different
in
world
a way
now,
that was it was self-taught, but it was probably the same amount of time and passion I had to put into it to get to that point.
Which just shows you perseverance. Well, yeah, good.
That's actually one of the most important things: tenacity, perseverance, and be honest with your talents. I mean, there's that Monty Python clip. I don't know if you remember that, where the guy wants to be a lion tamer or something.
Oh yeah.
And really is he's a pencil pusher, and the career advice person tries to steer him away from the big cats. And that's kind of the thing. I mean, you have to be honest with your abilities, but if you got that talent and the passion, then I would say go for it. Then the world is really open.
Good. That's really good advice. Good advice.
Yeah.
Are you a fan of like British comedies then and British humour? Is that kind of your cup of tea?
Love Monty Python, man. How can you not?
Yeah, it's classic.
And, I mean, I think any intelligent person would love Monty Python.
Yeah. No, I think it was ahead of its time back in the day, wasn't it? It's very, very original. You've made, like you said, music for, let's say, over 100 games. How incredible is that? Have you actually played every game you've made music for? And is there actually your personal favourite video game? Not necessarily the music, but the game that you thought, I love it.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely, on any project I work on, I dive into it and I feel it out. And that includes often playing early demo versions or getting like graphics or video footage or something like that.
Yeah.
So I know the games I'm working on, obviously, but after my career started, the gaming really became less and less frequent.
Yeah.
just because I don't have the time to really invest. What I do often nowadays is actually look at newer games, at the playthroughs on YouTube.
Oh, okay.
I usually seek out the ones that have no commentary, so I can enjoy the music and the sound.
Yeah.
And so that's usually how I became how I stay on top of like what's going on in the games industry. The last big games that I played really front to back were the Portal series, Portal 1 and 2.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Which I adore.
Properly Valve
for me, those are some of the best games ever made.
They're your favourite, Portal, yeah.
Yeah, really. Because,
I'm a huge Half-Life fan, yeah.
Yeah, particularly because I'm not a big fan, and that's my personal choice of violent video games.
Yeah.
I don't like the war simulations that you see everywhere, or war or crime simulations.
Yeah.
I find that personally not appealing. But taking like a first-person shooter kind of feel and ambience and put that into, like in kind of like, if you will, a puzzle game.
It is really, isn't it?
With Portal was absolutely brilliant.
It's very clever. If they ever made a Portal 3, would that be a game you'd like to make music for? I know it's a bit hypothetical question, but would that interest you?
Absolutely, yeah. I would love to work on a game like that, and it would also frighten me because they set the bar so high. I mean, there wasn't that much music in Portal, but the music that was there was very well done to support the gameplay and in parts subdued, but very clever. And I was in awe of the whole sound design of that game. And if the other thing is, if Portal 3 comes out, I will buy it on the first day.
Yeah, sound like a mega fan. I was to actually ask you quickly. There's been a big resurgence recently of video game music on vinyl. So people buying vinyl copies of the classic soundtracks of games. Have any of your games made it to vinyl? Is it something that interests you? What's your views on that big sort of growing industry?
Yeah, yes. So here's the thing. I find this very interesting, the vinyl revival.
Yeah. And
I have released vinyls myself, particularly for I did several Kickstarters, as you may know.
That's right.
To
yeah.
revive the old projects, including Turrican series, and we're now on this was the fourth Kickstarter we did last year, and the third Turrican style project, and the last two actually were orchestral renditions of Turrican music.
Wow!
And this came about because a fan of mine who had contacted me when he was a teenager. And wrote me letters like, "I'm your biggest fan ever," and I've gotten quite a few of those letters, and I thought not much of it, everybody says that they're biggest fan, but he probably was the one because he made his career bringing video game music to the orchestra, and his name is Thomas Böcker.
Wow, yeah.
And and he did concerts in Leipzig for that older. Before Gamescom, there was Games Convention in Leipzig, and he did a series of concerts with that convention there. And then he branched out and produced his own concerts. And the first one that he produced totally by himself was Symphonic Shades, which was really his love letter to my music, and got a big orchestra from the WDR, which is one of the large radio stations over in Germany, to play a full-length concert of my music. And that was also simultaneously broadcast on the radio, which was probably the first for video game music. It was live broadcast on the radio, played by a 70-plus orchestra and choir. So that another highlight of my career, I would say. Like, I remember sitting in those concerts and like tears were running down my cheeks constantly. So amazing.
I bet I mean, your hard work, obviously has touched a lot of people. So it must mean quite a lot to you, obviously. And,
fantastic. And the thing is, I mean, I never learned how to properly score an orchestra. I have done a lot of like reading about it, and I can put probably together a fairly decent sounding orchestral arrangement. But we actually hired professionals to do the arrangements and orchestrations, and it shows. It was really all the projects I've done with Thomas have really been. Each one has been better than the previous one, and it's now, I would say, without wanting to toot our horns too much, but I think it's world-class stuff. And the latest two actually, we did a record in Sweden, and that was Turrican music. The first for Turrican 2, the second one was more a mix of all the Turrican titles.
Yeah.
We recorded in Sweden with an orchestra, and funded by Kickstarter, by the fans. We put essentially every cent into those projects, and those also included vinyl, and that comes back to your question. But they're not the original recordings from the machines from like Amiga or consoles. Which I think, like a lot of vinyl re-releases or something, are just taking the nostalgia and then taking the original sounds and putting them on vinyl. And I think that's a little bit disingenuous. Then it becomes just like kind of like cool collectible. But we did a step further and actually put full orchestra onto the vinyl.
Love it. I'm going to be checking those out, definitely. So they're still available, aren't they, to buy?
Yes, and they're also limited edition.
Oh yeah.
So they're a little bit more pricey, but you get like a full box set with two vinyls because CD length doesn't fit on one.
Yeah.
So there are two vinyls, and there's some nice art prints in there too that you can frame and put on your wall. And it's a nice packaging, and the CD is also included.
Oh wow.
And we also, everybody who buys one gets the download code as well. So if it's like a really strong collector, then they can actually leave the box in shrink wrap and can still enjoy the music because they get the download code as well. So that's how we do this. And they're all numbered and serialized. So
good. Where's the best place to find this? Would you say your personal website or?
We made actually a website for all those Turrican soundtracks, and it's called turricansoundtrack.com.
Nice. Simple.
Yeah.
Brilliant. I've got about 2 or 3 questions left.
Absolutely.
You mentioned a few bands already, a few things that you like listening to, but is there any particular bands that you love listening to now or back in the day that have helped inspire you throughout the years?
Yeah, I think we mentioned the synthesizer greats already. Then in the 80s, was a lot of, as I said, Italian disco.
Yeah.
And British pop as well.
Oh yeah.
New wave and stuff like that. And became a big fan of the Pet Shop Boys.
Good, yeah, good stuff.
Anything that Trevor Horn produced always blows my mind. I mean, things like Frankie Goes to Hollywood and countless others. I mean, those held up so well.
Classics.
Absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
And then film music, I mentioned a few. John Williams, first and foremost.
Yeah.
Hans Zimmer, Alain Silvestri, Jerry Goldsmith. There's a ton of people I admire there. A few of the synthesizer legends also made it into film music, like Vangelis, obviously.
Yeah.
Then a couple of years ago, what absolutely blew me away was the soundtrack for Tron 2.
Oh, I need to see that. I've heard good things.
It's absolutely fantastic. And so that soundtrack was amazing.
I've seen the first one, and I've I've got to see the second one now.
Yeah,
it's good stuff.
And then we mentioned a few games, but I'm not that good with names, but I mentioned a few. But today, a couple of years ago, I don't know if they have a new album out, but Hybrid, which is also from England.
Oh yeah.
They're amazing, and then there's also I listen to a lot of this synthwave, which is like a revival of the '80s sound.
Yeah.
The Stranger Things soundtrack, for example.
It's excellent, isn't it?
And, or that Drive soundtrack from the movie Drive, which has different people who kind of do that stuff.
Exactly. That's a great. I mean, one of our colleagues. Yeah, one of my colleagues in Arcade Attack, Keith, he loves that film, and I think the music's part of the reason. Well, I love the film as well, but it's definitely up there. It is a great soundtrack. Can't deny that.
So there's a lot, and I'm also a big fan of Spotify.
Yeah.
And that's interesting because I'm a music consumer, but I'm also an artist on there. I have my music, everywhere. Where online music is consumed, like be it iTunes or Spotify in that case, others.
There you go. Yeah.
But really, I'm as like an artist, I like Spotify too, and this is probably controversial for some people. But I actually get most of my royalties now from Spotify.
Wow.
I think it's because I'm directly putting my music out myself. And I don't have a record company in between that skims off most of the money. So
clever.
So I'm actually very happy with that. And they have this feature where they analyze what you listen to, and then they send you a weekly playlist, or fill up a weekly playlist that you can listen to. And I have discovered amazing new music that I didn't even know existed or is brand new, that kind of sounds like the 80s again, and I'm super like I feel like a kid again.
Brilliant. That's a good little tip. And Spotify, there you go. It sounds like a good platform for new and old artists. So good on you, Chris. I like that.
Absolutely.
The penultimate question. You kind of mentioned a bit here earlier about your Kickstarter campaigns, but what projects or games are you currently working on? Are you allowed to disclose a few little snippets?
I'm working on several indie projects. One of them is called Tiny Tor.
Okay.
Which is like a cute side-scroller, jump and run type of game. So that one is fun. And then there's actually a new C64 game that I'm involved with.
Wow.
That's coming out. It's called Unknown Realm.
Good.
That was also a Kickstarter last year. And then I'm working on finishing up that second Kickstarter of mine, that Turrican, mixed from different Turrican pieces. We already delivered the orchestra recordings to the backers and fans.
Yep.
In digital form, but I'm still working on actually creating new Amiga renditions or new Amiga compositions.
Wow.
With my original old tools that are then recorded on a real Amiga, and they fill a second album that we're delivering to the fans. And so that's still in the works, and we're hoping to deliver that sometime in April, May of this year.
You're a busy man. You're doing so many things.
Tell me about it.
Obviously people can follow you on Twitter. They can check your website out. They can keep up to date that way.
Absolutely. And then I don't know if you heard of my lifestyle change that I did 2 years ago, where my wife and I, we sold our house in the San Francisco Bay Area, and we actually moved into a motorhome and traveled the US.
Really?
Yeah, and I'm still doing that. So,
are you tempted to travel maybe across Europe a bit more, go back to your old digs, or are you sticking to America?
Yeah, maybe. I couldn't take this motorhome over there, but it might be possible to like rent one and do like an extended trip through Europe. That would be fun.
Well, if you're ever in the UK, always give us a shout. It'd be cool to catch up. But brilliant, No, I really appreciate it. I think you're working hard. The work you've put out is top quality, so I know that our fans will love this. Before I say goodbye then, Chris, because we've almost spoken an hour now, so I won't take any more of your time. Bit of a strange question. If you could go for a drink, or maybe a couple of steins of lager, with any video game character, who would you choose and why?
Video game character.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know really. I'm tempted to say Mario.
Yeah?
Just for the fun. He seems like a funny character, that could be a fun-filled evening.
Yeah, it would be, wouldn't it? I mean, he's got lots of tales to tell.
Yeah,
definitely.
lots of stories, exactly.
He's been in so many games, he could talk for hours, couldn't he?
Exactly.
Nice.
I would say so. Yeah, let's go with Mario.
Why not? Why not? We'll kick Luigi away and just have a few drinks with Mario. Look, Chris, it's been a real pleasure. You're a proper legend in our eyes. The music you've created has been part of our childhood. And I do honestly appreciate your time today. So thank you so much for talking to me today. Yeah, my pleasure. This was really fun. You know to ask the right questions, and I enjoyed this. Oh, thank you, Chris. And thanks to all the fans out there, and people who may not know me should try to discover me. I'm easy to find online. I'll say goodbye now, and I know for a fact our fans will love it. So thank you again so much. Okay, thanks, and bye.